Hi, welcome everybody. It's February 15. This is the C4 I-205 Tolling Diversion Subcommittee. And we have most of our group here, and other folks will come in as needed. And we have our first guest speaker here. It's Della Mosier from ODOT, and I'm sure you probably have somebody from the rest of your team. Della, let me know when we get ready for that. Let me know who else needs to come in with you, and I'll keep looking for folks coming in as they come in. I want to start our meeting with a little bit of housekeeping though, and then Commissioner Savas, you currently are without a co-chair in this group, and that is the first order of business. I have, as part of the survey that went out with the meeting announcement and through some other avenues, I have 3 names of note to propose that have been who have been interested in co-chairing this meeting with you. That is Commissioner Adam Marl. That is Councilor Mary Baumgartner, and then Councilor, I believe it's Octavio Gonzalez from Tualatin voices interest at the last meeting. So I don't see that last member here at this meeting in particular. I do recommend that it's an impacted city, just per your comments when this was initially done over a year ago. And then there is no process for how that member will be selected or not. So I leave it to you, Commissioner Savas, to help facilitate that discussion, or I'm happy to help as well. Rock, paper, scissors, according to Councilor Sherman.
Well, sure. Well, thank you all for joining us, and welcome everyone. I typically, the cities, sometimes we share the roles between a city and the county commissioner, and so this meeting is similar to that. So I guess I'll just, again, it's thinking more for the city folks to appoint, but I guess we're not really limited to that per se by any particular rules. So I guess, Randall, I guess you can vote as well, I presume. So Della, I guess you can't. And Trent, I'm being a little bit funny here. So are there nominations for the co-chair of this group?
Well, there are 3. So
yeah,
Octavio Gonzalez and Adam Marl and Mary Baumgartner.
Right. There's 3 people that expressed interest, right, Trent?
Yeah, correct.
But there's not a nomination. So I'll ask for a nomination for the co-chair of this group. Unless you all have a better way of approaching this.
That's a great question. Could I ask the 2 attendees to just give 30 seconds of how they'll add value to the equation? Because I like you both, and I think you're both good people. And I mean, I could flip a coin.
Rock, paper, scissors, Adam. I have time, and I'm really interested in digging down further on this topic. But I'm happy to have full confidence in Adam as well. So honestly, I'm happy for whatever outcome.
Yeah, so I've been on this committee since the beginning, and being from Oregon City, I'm obviously very interested in this topic. I work in the state legislature where these big conversations are happening. And so I just left the building, and I'm actually in the League of Oregon Cities building right now to keep it all separate. But this is something where I'm steeped in it, both as a city commissioner and as my day job working for someone who represents Clackamas County in the state legislature. And so I think either way will be well suited, but that is my interest. Thank you.
Very good. Both intriguing candidates for sure. I'm gonna, at the risk of offending Councilor Baumgartner, I like you. You are a wonderful person to hang out with. I will make a motion to nominate Commissioner Marl for the co-chair position.
I second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay. Seeing none. I think with that, I would say that it's this is a show of hands to support that vote. I guess maybe there's an abstention. Okay,
You get to vote too, Adam.
all right. Any abstentions? Any no's? Congratulations, Mr. Morrill. You are, or Commissioner Morrill. You are now my fellow co-chair. I appreciate that. And what's the first order of business now, Trent?
So I need to provide with you an update on the outcome of the survey that you all took. We had 3 respondents and then a couple emails that came in, just with some context. The survey was intended to sort of digest whether this was the right meeting time and the right meeting length for you to accomplish your goals and missions. I think the goals and mission of this group, per a couple emails, might actually be part of the thing to figure out. But during the EA season, since the EA is supposed to drop here very soon, maybe that's a question to revisit shortly after, that comment period. The results of the survey are pretty straightforward from those 3 respondents. It's really that this is as good a meeting time as any, in terms of, there's not really a great need to change. That doesn't mean that it's a great meeting time. It just means that it is a meeting time that works right now. And that if there was an interest to make it longer, an hour and a half would be sufficient. But really the comments that have come in by email is that it's not about the meeting length. It's about the scope of what's being presented in the meeting and how much time is left to discuss. And so now that we have co-chairs, again, and with that feedback, I think I'm here, the ODOT team is here with me. They're in the audience and throughout. So I think it's incumbent upon me as your administrator, the co-chairs as well, and then the ODOT team, as we're bringing information to you, to make sure that you have enough discussion time, that presentations are specific and short and to the point, so that y'all have sufficient time to discuss what's being presented and address questions as needed. That's my takeaway from the survey results and the feedback that's come in separately, but I'm open to, your reaction to that.
Anyone want to jump in? I think that sounds consistent with what I've heard, most especially with regard to the scope of what we discuss and the value. I do know there's a lot of interest amongst you all that our work product, if you want to call it that, is something that we're going to be presenting here, if you want to call it that, here at the next C4 meeting, I believe, right, Trent? Or the one after?
We have a lot coming up.
Yeah, there's a lot coming up. So I will, myself and Commissioner Morrow will work together offline as we need to make sure we're representing where you all want to do, what you all want to have for the agenda, to make sure that what we do represent as our work is, consistent and appeals to you all. I would like, if we could, just some input right now, if this is the appropriate time, Trent, just your input of where any specifics that you, high level specifics, that's almost doesn't make sense, but is there anything in particular that stands out that you want to see us adjust in the agenda going forward? Because we got the time issue settled out, the length settled out, but as far as topics in the agenda, is there anything significant that you want to see different or added or subtracted? Councilor Sherman.
Yeah, I think that we've laid a good foundation so far, and I from a personal perspective, I would love to continue to go down the path of taking deeper dives into kind of the tolling revenue side, understanding kind of what the potential revenue looks like. There was like that 117-page document that we received that kind of shows a lot of the detail behind the scenes, but really to all the modeling that goes into that is great, but I also want to know kind of where it's going to go, how it's going to be used. We've had anecdotal information or that says that it may not even just cover the cost of running the program for a period of time, and so that's something I'd like to really dig into as we have opportunities to do that, to continue to move down that path. And then of course on the diversion side, we talked about it this morning at C4 Metro Subcommittee. A lot of even the RTP is impacted by the potential for diversion and putting projects in place that could potentially mitigate that. And how do you know how to devote these hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in the future if we can't even get a grip on what potentially could happen from this? So I want to continue to kind of fine tune the modeling, understand the implications of that, and maybe it is, when we kind of, and I apologize for hijacking this for a couple seconds, when we've talked about the 50 plus locations that they did modeling around for mitigation, it is so high level that it's hard to really kind of understand, like, what does that really mean at the local level? And so, I don't know if that's over the course of time that we're digging a bit more deeply into the impacted jurisdictions. I don't know what that could be, but so far, I guess my point is I think that the information has been helpful and informative, and I think that continuing to fine tune that, what we've done so far is a positive. So thanks for letting me talk.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilor Sherman. I do know the title of this committee has the word diversion in it, right? And I know we're really focused on diversion, and absent any solutions and absent revenue sharing, which sounds like there's not any will. We've heard nothing positive about revenue sharing. So therefore, our ability to influence mitigation or solutions is very limited. And as I understand it, by the way, that the RTAC, the RTAC committee, will, as is currently structured, their work will subside the day tolling begins.
Hi, everybody.
Commissioner Schrader's joined us, leaving a book on my counter here. So, if their work subsides and the committee's work is done, once tolling starts, which is what, a year and a half from now, late 2024, that means that, will this committee continue on? Will we have any input? I just don't have the comfort, frankly, that monitoring, which was the topic of the last meeting, I got no comfort that it's going to help us or we can influence solutions. I thought there was some apples to oranges comparison in that comparison with Washington State. So I don't think that really fit, but I think the issue we're all concerned about is diversion, at least primarily. And I appreciate, Counselor, you bring up the revenue. I am equally interested, if not more so, in that, because the other factor unrelated to this committee is that if tolling becomes a substitute for gas tax revenue, then so should the revenue sharing at the 50-30-20 split where gasoline is today. As cities, you enjoy the 20%, counties, we enjoy the 30%. And to hear in some of the discussion or the information being shared by ODOT, and I know they're in the audience today, and a part of this group here today, is that they've said that tolling will maintain roads and facilities. So that's a gas tax function, but yet diversion's also putting a load on our facilities when interstate traffic is being diverted off onto our local roads. So we don't even have the revenue stream to even take care of the maintenance caused by diversion in and of itself, let alone the impacts to our businesses and to everything else. So I've said a lot. Councilor Baumgartner, I see you're up.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just wanted to kind of come back to the feedback on this meeting I shared with Trent, and as well as doing the survey. Just generally speaking, I would like to see more accessible. I understand having data to back up conclusions, but I'd like to see the distillation, and I want the bad news. I don't want things to be kind of phrased in, equity lens and all of that. I really would like to dispense with the jargon if we can talk just straight, because I think that, and the reason why I'm saying this, and I hope I'm not trying to be insensitive or offensive, but I just want to state the goal and the mandate for public access is that we are representing constituencies. We don't have traffic engineering backgrounds necessarily. I don't personally. So I need information that's accessible to me, that I don't have to consult with a professional in the area to explain to me what this means, that kind of information. I'd like things simplified. So in an hour meeting, we can actually digest it and then have less presentation time, more Q&A time. Thank you.
I have heard that especially that latter part, Counselor, I heard that as well. So if there was a proportion of the meeting that was presentation and a portion of a meeting that was our discussion or interaction with staff, whoever it may be, or ourselves, what proportion would you like to see? I'll put you on the spot.
Oh, me? How about 30-70 presentation, question and answer discussion, honestly. And maybe like we're doing right now. I mean, usually we jump into the presentation. So have a discussion a little bit now, have a presentation, and then lots of time for Q&A, because we don't get a lot of time to sit and talk to each other outside of this meeting. I mean, really not much at all. So that's would be mine. Thank you.
Okay, so 30% presentation, 70% discussion. Okay. Councillor Morrow, or Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you. One thing that I would like us to consider as we look to the future and the implementation of this program is how for each of us this is going to develop, how this is going to impact future developments. When developers are going to be looking at failing intersections because of the diversion, I think we need to know how we as cities are going to have to interact with developers and in regards to improvements at failing intersections. So that's something that will be affecting us all in the future of our communities that I hope we'll be able to discuss on this subcommittee.
Okay, great. Councillor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. To your direct question, I think that as long as over half the time of every meeting is spent with us in discussion, like that's the threshold for real engagement for me. I think the best that we can hope for is like 5 slides. I know that sometimes it can't be in any fewer, but the fewer slides, the more in a pre-read packet would be my preference. I guess secondarily, we've been doing things kind of topically as, you know, the NEPA process has driven lots of kind of like data questions. I would hope that in this next year, we can do kind of a geographic deep dive, and in each city or bundled area of intersections, do a deep dive into what the data is, what the modeling is, and like really understand what each city is facing in terms of projects currently in the works that aren't funded and projects longer on the horizon. Because I think right now we are missing what each city is kind of sitting with, which is a project list way longer than anybody could even anticipate funding, and like having to come up with near-term solutions feels impossible.
Okay, and how much time, well, a meeting would take if our polling or survey was accurate, like Trent indicated, that would be an 1.5-hour meeting for something like that?
I'm the diabolical person who said 90 minutes sounded good. I respect other people might not feel the same way, but I can see it taking 45 minutes to do a deep dive on a city. So we might only be able to fit 2 cities in one meeting.
Okay, point taken, great. Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Hodson, thank you for joining us. The question that we're asking right now is, or one of them, we're just discussing process and how these meetings run and what we want to see. So the question I'm asking folks, a proportion of time spent for presentation versus, or on the other side, how much time us talking to each other and discussing data and details. What proportion would you like to see?
Well, just jumping on here and catching the last couple of people that were speaking, you know, I think more discussion, less presentation. I mean, at this point, I think we know where this is going and where it's heading, and I think it's us making sure that we have, as Council President Baumgartner was talking about, having the ability and time to for this group to talk and figure out how we can be coming up with ideas for some of these problems. So some solution creation, I think, out of this group to be able to have conversation about would be the most beneficial.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Randall, you're on mute.
Based on what Commissioner Lewis was saying, about the deep dive into specific cities. We're at Stafford area, we're really at the focus of the diversion traffic coming from I-205 to avoid the tolling. And so we would like to have a seat in that conversation, a specific, like she was saying, a specific time, like comparable to what the cities would receive.
Yep, and Randall, in some ways or many ways, that's a responsibility, I think, not only myself, but also our staff at the county feel a responsibility to make sure that the unincorporated areas are well represented, and we have a pretty deep bench when it comes to transportation. So it's a matter of coordinating. So I'll do my best. Okay.
Thank you.
Trent?
Yes, thank you. So I am hearing two things. I just want some clarification, please. One is that from the survey that 60 minutes is fine, but tighten up the meeting structure. But I've also heard conversation about a 90-minute meeting. And so I'm looking to you right now to please tell me, do you want a 90-minute meeting or a 60-minute meeting?
Okay. Councilor Pratt?
I'm in total agreement. I think like in the beginning part of the meeting and presentation should be 30 minutes or less. And on the hour and a half, I think maybe it should be an hour and a half, and we could, if our discussion doesn't go as long, the meeting could be ended early.
Okay. Mayor Hodson?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Valerie on that one. I would rather block out an hour and a half, and if we need it, great. If we don't, then we don't, and we have the gift of time. I don't know about many of you, but I live and die by my calendar, and so and I tend to overbook myself, and so when things run over because conversation is good, especially on a meeting that's like now in the middle, kind of in the afternoon or whatever, then I get to scramble, which I do so much enjoy, but would rather make sure that I block out enough time, and I can definitely fill my time if the meeting ends early.
Okay, so I'm just gonna propose maybe for the next meetings or so that we allow 20 minutes for staff presentation or whatever the presentation is, and then the remainder discussion. And if we end early, then it's an hour meeting or more, a little bit more. Or if it goes long, either way, I think that 20 minutes might balance itself out, and we can do the deep dive and all those other things that heard requested. Does that just 20 minutes sound about right? Okay. Councilor Merle or Commissioner Merle?
Yeah, either works. Either is fine. I was one of the people who had put 90 minutes into the survey. I think that's going to suit us best. However, if we do the 90 minutes, I would ask that we consider a time later that doesn't eat as much into the workday.
Okay. Okay, Trent, does that get what you want?
I mean, if we're doing a different time, that's doodle poll. And I'm asking you to like find 90 minutes somewhere else in your calendar. I mean, maybe my recommendation is kind of to Mayor Hodson's point, maybe we take a soccer approach where there's stoppage time. We're aiming for a 1 hour meeting, but clock it for 90 minutes, and we'll schedule a 60-minute meeting. And if it goes to 90, there's the space for it. And it's kind of incumbent upon everybody here to make that space. And some of you will have it, some of you will not. I know that many of you are elected officials and volunteers in that role, right? And so that's just the nature of the game. But if this is the time, if we're going to do 90 minutes and the time is not working, I need to know now so I can get a doodle poll going here in the next week or so.
Okay. Councilor Sherman.
I have a number of meetings kind of that overlap. So easiest for me if we keep the same time and using Mr. Wilson's concept, kind of block the calendar off and use his stoppage time. That's unfortunately that's easier for me than jumping out into the evening hours or the late afternoon hours and trying to kind of restructure a 90-minute time. I guess, but I'm open to whatever the majority wants to work with. I'm luckily, have my own business, so I can kind of figure that out. But my preference would be keep it here, make it 90 and end early if you can.
All right, great. Any other input, folks? Trent?
Just my final word of input, and this was to your conversation earlier before ODOT begins their presentation, is that the title of this group is the C4 I-205 Tolling Diversion Subcommittee. Please don't feel like you are hamstrung by the diversion piece of this or the tolling piece of this. It is the C4 committee and some of its frameworks. So if the diversion piece is holding you up and you feel like it needs to be adjusted in some way, we can talk about that. The EA will get you through the spring. The retreat, the C4 retreat happens in early June. I mean, if we want to just make it to the retreat and then have a little, metaphysical discussion about what is this group, that might be an appropriate, path forward over the next couple of months.
Okay. Hearing no other comments, is it time for our presentation?
Yes, sir.
And what's the time? What's the time that's was carved out for that, Trent?
We did not specifically set a time for this, but my understanding was that it's primarily an update about what's coming and the notifications and the information that's going to be available with the EA. So I'm happy to present or introduce you to Della Mosier and Nicole Dermott from ODOT to share information.
Okay, and then Della, if you could make sure that if we do end at 1 here today, that we at least allow 10-15 minutes for questions and comments.
Absolutely, Commissioner Savas, and I want to thank this group for having us here again today to talk about the upcoming release of the draft environmental assessment for the I-205 toll project, and we'll do our best to ensure that there's some time for comments and questions. Before I turn it over to Nicole, who is with our consultant team with WSP, to talk through the engagement, I just want to thank this group for continuing to get together pretty frequently to talk through a lot of the top issues related to the I-205 toll project in Clackamas County and the communities there. Hearing loud and clear still concerns about diversion and mitigation of diversion, and we understand and know that there's more work to do independent of the draft environmental assessment being out for comment, and we will continue to do that work. One of the topics we'll be leaning into, would like to talk with this committee more about, is that monitoring program and what that really means, what those details are, hearing questions about that. And so we are working towards putting together documents that we can talk through with this group and get your input and feedback on what a monitoring program for the I-205 toll project that would work for Oregonians and for those in the region and in your communities would look like. So this will be our first opportunity here in Oregon to address that topic in our own way, and definitely we'll need that continued input and partnership throughout that journey. So with that, we'll talk about, again, one of the ways that we're looking for input and feedback on the 205 toll project, which is through the publication of the initial environmental assessment. And we look forward to continuing to work with you as you work up your comments that will be heard directly by our federal highways partners, as well as our team, and addressed, and look forward to talking through how your concerns and issues would be included in the revised environmental assessment as this conversation continues forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Nicole. Next slide.
Thank you, Della. And yeah, thank you everybody for having us here again today. So as Della mentioned today, we really want to cover an update on the environmental assessment, what we've heard, how we have incorporated feedback, the planned engagement during the comment period, which will include how we're getting the word out, as well as how you can get information and provide feedback to us. We also wanted to just share a few slides about the monitoring framework that we were not able to present during the last meeting in January. So this is not a detailed discussion about monitoring, just a few quick slides to kind of prepare for next month and perhaps a more detailed discussion. Then we'll cover a few next steps in the process as well. Next slide. So as most of you have probably already heard, we do have a publication date now for the EA. So we will be publishing next Tuesday on February 21st. That will start a 45-day public comment period, which will end on Friday, April 7th at 4 p.m. Next slide. So through our coordination with you all, with your staff, the public, other partners, throughout this process, we've already received a lot of feedback, and we've tried to incorporate that feedback throughout the process. So all of our participating agencies reviewed the proposed methodologies that you will see in the EA for transportation and for the other resource analyses. So we also heard a lot about the importance of identifying safety impacts and mitigation, the need for multimodal improvements and improved transit service and accessibility. We've heard it's important to continue coordinating with the local governments and transit agencies, and that ongoing monitoring is essential. So some of the things that we've already heard again today and continue to talk about. Next slide. So just quickly, a high level of a few ways that you'll see these things addressed in the environmental assessment and how we've been addressing them throughout the process. So we've really shifted, how and what we were analyzing based on some of the feedback that we received. So that included extending the area of potential impact and the number of study intersections that we analyzed. We completed an extensive safety analysis at the intersection and roadway segment level, and included some safety specific mitigations. We've talked about those here before, and you'll see those included in the environmental assessment. We have added active transportation and transit improvements and made other refinements to the proposed mitigations, as well as we have had those ongoing conversations. We are also continuing to coordinate with staff, transit agencies, and of course, working with you all over the coming months on the details of that monitoring plan and framework. Next slide. So now I want to cover the engagement that will happen during the comment period. Next slide. Just at a high level, kind of a snapshot. So again, the comment period will start on February 21st. It'll end on April 7th. The goal of the engagement during this comment period is really to provide a variety of opportunities to engage with the project team so you can understand the environmental assessment and how to comment. We want to provide for equitable engagement with a variety of in-person and virtual opportunities. We've developed a variety of notification and materials and methods. This includes some project videos, an interactive map. There'll also be a variety of ways to actually comment, including verbal comment, email, a comment form, and comment via voicemail. So I'll cover each of these items in a little more detail on the next slides. So for the notifications, so the tools that we're using for notifications will include a press release and media briefing, which will be done as soon as the EA is released on the 21st, and then participating agency notifications. So some of those went out last week, identifying the actual publication date. Then there'll be additional notifications that will go out next Tuesday. Then there's also a legal notice of availability that you'll see posted in your local newspapers, as well as social media and digital display ads, which those will be, a bit more visible to the majority of the public, as opposed to that legal notice that's kind of put in the legal notice section of the paper. We'll also be sending emails to partners and community-based organizations and preparing project flyers that we'll be using throughout our engagement events. Next slide. So the informational tools include a series of overview videos. So we found that it is easier a lot of times for people to interact and connect with the information via video. It's a lot of information to take in. So wanting to highlight some key takeaways from some of the topics that we've received the most questions on. So, transportation, economics, air quality, and climate and environmental justice. Those are the things we've heard a lot of questions on throughout the process. We'll also have a video specifically on how to comment on the environmental assessment. And then we'll have an updated website with a new landing page specific to the EA. There'll also be a multi-page fact sheet, an executive summary, and we've prepared an interactive map, which will allow you to actually look at the study intersections, click into those, see what the impacts were at those intersections, if there were impacts, and then what mitigations are proposed for those intersections as well. So just another way to really engage with the information, hopefully in a more interactive way than just reading the environmental assessment. And then hard copies of the document will actually be posted at public libraries as well in the area. So that'll be at Canby, Tualatin, Oregon City, and West Lynn. Then opportunities for engagement during the comment period. So this will include a public and participating agency webinars, a virtual public hearing with the opportunity to provide that verbal public comment. Federal Highway Administration and ODOT staff will both be present at that virtual public hearing. And there'll be in-person outreach that's really focused on equitable engagement and connecting with those historically underrepresented and underserved communities. So we really want to, work to meet people where they are, and versus asking them to come to us just to events. So setting up tables at grocery stores, community centers, things like that. We'll also be conducting some door-to-door outreach in business districts in the area and providing briefings and presentations to partner agencies. Next slide. So how to comment. We've kind of been through this a bit already, but you'll be able to provide your comments in a variety of ways, including that verbal comment at the public hearing, filling out a comment form. They'll be linked from the project website. Most communication materials are also including a QR code that you can directly scan and go to the web page, the landing page, and then comments can also be sent via email to the project email address or left as a voicemail. Next slide. So after the comment period, we will take all of the comments we received. We'll review them with Federal Highway Administration and begin to address those comments. It will inform whether additional analysis is needed, how we actually refine or prepare new mitigation solutions. And then we'll continue to have this ongoing dialogue with you and with our partners to determine specifically how those comments and concerns are addressed and what those final mitigation solutions look like that would be included in the revised EA and the NEPA decision document. So with that, then I did just want to talk quickly about that monitoring framework that we have discussed a little bit, and we want to get into more details of at the next meeting. So next slide. So the purpose of the monitoring framework and a monitoring plan will be to develop a schedule to routinely monitor and assess changes in traffic and safety patterns at various times and by various modes. So we really need to collaborate with our partner agencies to achieve a comprehensive understanding of the changes that need to be captured in this monitoring plan. The plan will identify data collection needs as well. So, what the data collection milestones, when we will be collecting data, the tools and responsibility for who and how the data will be collected, the frequency of data collection as well. And some of that frequency could vary based on the type of data. There may be things that we need to collect at specific times of day or times of year versus other types of data. And then identifying the geographic locations for the data collection as well. Those are all things that we'll want to discuss with you all as we're preparing that plan and framework for how the monitoring will actually take place. Next slide. So then reporting, obviously the plan will need to get into some details about reporting as well, and the frequency of reporting, how often that will happen. And it'll be important to understand that some of the metrics may be dependent on data at certain times. So there may be things that there's only data available on an annual basis. So that will affect how those items are reported. And then for the metrics for monitoring, these are some things based on other monitoring programs, but again, we'll want to get into the details of this and if these are the appropriate metrics, but vehicle speed, volumes, travel times, transit information, bicycle information, as well as safety related accidents, injuries, those types of things, how intersections are actually performing, again, looking at the things we looked at in the transportation analysis for the EA, the volume to capacity ratio, the level of service, and then other specific events or incidents in the area. So then as we've talked about before, just wanting to kind of quickly go over the next steps, as we've understood it for this committee. I think the next meeting will want some more input on monitoring and partnerships. And then following that, we'll want to get more into a recommendation on what that monitoring and partnership looks like, so that we can put it in place and it can help inform the revised environmental assessment as well. Next slide. So just again, high level to kind of reiterate the overall environmental review process for 205, where we're at in this process. So we're at the orange dot, essentially. It's releasing the draft environmental assessment, and then we'll continue to do analysis, address comments, and then prepare that revised EA and that NEPA decision document with lots of input that we'll get from the public comment period, and then the coordination will continue to do over the next several months. And then I think that's it for our presentation here, and I'll turn it back over to Della if she has any closing remarks.
Thanks, Nicole. Well, I think we've saved 17 minutes, so ahead of our 15-minute metric here. And I think we might be at 25% to 75 today. So I think hopefully we're trending in the right direction for a lot of comments here. Won't take up any more time, and happy to hear comments, questions, and input. We'll be taking notes and ensuring that we're addressing your feedback.
Okay, I have one. I'll just kick this off. So the monitoring, as I saw, you're gonna do pre-tolling monitoring before the program starts, and then the day after and thereon. So my question is, and this is something that kind of, I can't let it go, but the part I was taken aback by was realizing that the traffic analysis was only done at peak times, and not Monday through Friday. Well, not just Monday through Friday, but not Saturday, not Sunday, not evenings. So how that impacted businesses, because people will be economically driven to divert 24/7. Are you going to do the monitoring 24/7 for a 7-day week period, or a 7-day period, for example, of Monday through Friday? I mean, or is it just going to be peak hour?
So Commissioner Savas, great comment. And I think, when we look at environments where the peak hour isn't sufficient to address needs for intersection impacts or other traffic modeling issues. So in general, what we found from the data is that when we observe the peak hour, we can observe the off-peak hours or different times of day, but they generally don't rise to the level of impact as a peak hour. May or may not be the case to your question around 2 a.m. diversion or 10 p.m. diversion, or those sorts of things related to folks wanting to get to businesses or perhaps even earlier in the morning. So that can be something that we talk about as we're developing that monitoring plan together. I would point out we do have examples of where the off-peak happens on different days than we would normally see. And an example I can use is, for instance, out in Welch's, US 26 is probably not congested during the peak hours Monday through Friday, but Sunday afternoons and Saturday afternoons, it might be very congested out as folks wrap up their ski days up at Mount Hood. So we have seen those environments, and we'll be interested in keeping an eye out to ensure that the mitigation modeling that we're looking at is including, is addressing the largest impacts to those off-system improvements.
Well, thank you, Della. I'll just say this, you don't need to respond, and I'll take Councilor Lewis's questions as well. The kids in my street and other streets, they typically play on the weekends quite a bit, right? And they're marginally safe right now, marginally. And so the cut-throughs that happen because people are trying to save a dollar from diversion will impact local communities where there's just a reality. So that's what I'm concerned about. At least peak hour on the weekdays, kids are either in school or getting back or a soccer practice or doing their homework. So, but on the weekends, I see a greater presence of children in the neighborhoods and the streets than I normally do. So that's why I ask. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the clear and brief summary of what you had to present today. I guess I want to start with monitoring being a very passive name. I understand it's a term of art, but monitoring is passive. And I think what we are going to be interested in is remediation and action based off of real-time data and data sets as they come in. And data can also include modeling. So I totally respect that some of it is, getting a baseline and then doing modeling. But I'm not hearing anything about how decisions are going to be made based off of what comes in. And I know that's in the future, but at this point, I would like to know how local voices will be incorporated into that decision tree.
Great question, Councilor Lewis, and to be determined, but I would expect that we would continue and similar to the way that we've worked through the mitigation impacts with the staff from the local agencies, your professional staff, with their input and feedback on, looking at the transportation system plans in those areas, what projects are coming online, which solutions they recommend, which solutions their communities would prefer, and providing that very specific, unique solution for each area and each community. As we get into these conversations, we expect that those levels of conversation to continue, again, with your technical staff from each of the local agencies, providing input on what the metrics would be, how we would monitor that, when we would monitor it, who has what data can we take advantage of together in order to get as close to real time as we can. And then working, again, as we go to remediation or implementing solutions that weren't anticipated, that we would be going through the same process similar to what we've been going through related to the mitigation impact conversations, and then bringing those recommendations to groups like this for input and feedback before moving into implementation.
Okay. Totally get most of that. There's a couple of questions, but I guess overarching, I don't think that the meetings with professional staff at the local jurisdictions went well from my vantage point. I'm not a professional in this field, nor am I representing a jurisdiction that owns and manages roads. But the thing that happened around proportionality in August and September gave a lot of people heartburn that is still burning. And I think that we have a lot to do to gain confidence for that being the remedy.
If I could respond, Councilor Lewis, good comments. And I think, again, for this area where we've gotten the mitigation solutions and when you say proportionality, you're mentioning the share of who pays what for mitigation, I believe. I believe that there were just 3 intersections out of the dozens that were analyzed and included mitigation. I think there's at least a dozen in there that are on ODOT facilities, and in those circumstances, ODOT is responsible for those improvements completely. And so we do have a few that we're working through. I believe it's 3 or so, and we're going to continue to work through how we address those issues going forward. And I think we'll keep that in mind again as we look at monitoring and whether or not those are on the ODOT system or in local agency districts, and continue to look for ways to fairly distribute the proportionality between the agencies.
Thank you, Della, for that. I just want to share that I too have heard very similar things to what Councilor Lewis has said about some of those staff to staff not going so well. I think it's how it's being, well, obviously being interpreted, but really it seems as though hasn't been a consistent target or a consistent answer. And personally, again, I just have yet to see monitoring in any form really produce much in the way of confidence, especially with something as significant as this. So, Councilor Pratt.
I have two different questions. Just I'm trying to process or figure out how this process will work. And first is on the mitigation solutions. So you'll put together all this input from everybody, and then where do those mitigation solutions come in? Do you determine those, and what part does the federal government have in any say on those solutions? Because there's a federal review in the process, if I remember correctly. And so go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Councilor. And I may ask Nicole to jump in here a little bit on the exact next steps, but again, we work with the engineering staff from those local agencies to work through assumptions, to look at impacts, and then to work through solutions in areas where we're hearing loud and clear the solutions that the technical staff are able to bring up are not going to meet the need of that community. We're continuing to work through those with the elected officials and others, and to understand better. I think Councilor Lewis brought up a great suggestion of doing that deep dive in each community and looking at comprehensively the transportation system plans and how these improvements can hopefully complement the vision that that you as an elected have for your community based on input from your constituents. So we are trying to look at this from a broad stroke of not just exactly what a traffic model puts in and puts out, but more of what is the context and what are the needs and what are the appropriate solutions for communities. And in a few areas that's taking more time, and we are taking that additional time. So there will be opportunities again for you to refer back to your technical stuff on input, as well as directly to myself as Deputy Director of the Urban Mobility Office, Mandy Putney, overseeing this program, and then as well as Brendan Fenn, who's the Director of the Urban Mobility Office. We are committed to continuing those conversations so that we get to the right answers.
Okay, well, I really appreciate it if you came to Tualatin, because it's been quite a while since we've heard from you. And my other question has to do with the monitoring. And I was reading, you're going to monitor, you talked about these partnerships. So what I'm wondering is, like, on these roads that are county roads or city roads, does this partnership mean that the county or city will have to pay for the monitoring equipment and tracking the monitoring for those particular roads? Or is that a cost that ODOT's picking up?
I think the opportunity is to look at the existing monitoring equipment infrastructure that's in place all over the transportation system. So for instance, if the cities and counties generally have some level of traffic counts and information that they have. And my comment was really that we weren't going to just look at ODOT information. If there's additional information that counties and cities and local partners can supplement to help us further refine and get a better look at certain areas or impacts, that we would be looking for the opportunity to leverage all the information that we have in order to get to the solution, not to put the responsibility on the local agencies for that monitoring.
Okay, and then my last question is just like, once you have done the monitoring for a period of time, and if the results aren't as expected, will changes be made to address that?
That is the purpose of the monitoring plan, is our traffic modeling, and would, if the traffic modeling currently shows that there's a need for mitigation, we're including that in the environmental assessment document now. This is meant to be able to observe areas where maybe the modeling missed, and to be able to ensure that we're able to address those as those issues come up.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Baumgartner.
Thank you. I am just wondering what, if any, standard already exists for the failure, what constitutes failure, and how long is it allowed to be monitored before a remedy is required? Is there a standard for that now, or do we have an idea of what one might be if there isn't?
Great question, Councillor Baumgartner. I think there's been standards in traffic intersection failure since the 60s that we can look to, but we would consider those very much a baseline. And so as we develop this monitoring plan with the professional folks from your city and get their input on what they think or what they're seeing as being failures in their community, as well as getting suggestions and recommendations on how long monitoring should occur. Those items are to be determined because we want to make sure that we're developing a program that really fits with the needs of how the communities and how Oregonians want to be able to observe impacts of the transportation system.
Thank you for that information. Just as feedback, I'll say that's not very reassuring. And I will also reflect the fact that West Lynn has had failed diversion traffic impacts for 20 years. So anyway, there's that. Thank you.
Trent, are you okay if I go to Adam next? Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you. Not a question, just a comment and a little feedback. I just, listening to this and considering the 45-day comment period, I'm eager to read this document, but I struggle to figure out how to tell my constituents what the use of their time will be if they take the time to make these comments. Up until now, that's what I've been hearing from residents in Oregon City and across Clackamas County is, well, I don't even want to make a comment because I don't feel like it's going to make any difference. And I tell them as an elected official, I feel the same way. And so having listened to some hearings that the Joint Transportation Committee has had, that's something that our legislators are deeply aware of as well. And so just want to really stress that we take this comment period seriously and that we as electeds make sure that we're connecting to our constituents and encouraging them to make some comments on this. Because I have in front of me, I have a 29-page PDF in front of me that was compiled by some city staff people of all of our jurisdictions where we've sent letters to the OTC and to ODOT on comment periods. And I struggle to find areas where it feels like that has been put into due consideration. And I think that's how we all feel. So on that note, having had a call with some people in the Capitol yesterday, I know there's going to be talks of potentially having a hearing with the Joint Transportation Committee so that we can have an opportunity as Clackamas County electeds to testify to the legislators themselves and point out the fact that we've sent all these letters and feel like the comment periods to this date have not been taken very seriously. So thank you for the presentation. And my only other question was going to be about those ODOT covered intersections and just wanting to verify that those numbers still existed where it was only 2 or 3. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
We can follow up with you directly via email if that would work for this group.
Okay. Trent.
So time check, but also I want to let you know what our current plan is for helping C4 make a formal comment into the EA process. So we know that the EA is going to drop on the 21st per the presentation this morning. I've invited ODOT through Nicole and through Mandy to come to this big C4 meeting on March 2 to provide a briefing, which they're offering to anybody who asks for it, to provide a big briefing on the EA as presented. So when that will be available to the larger C4 body, many of you are either on it or have a representative on it. And of course, that's recorded. I've also invited ODOT to not count on that being like their presentation to the cities, just because all the cities are there. They've acknowledged that as well. So I think they're doing a good job in reaching out to all the cities. I want to acknowledge that work. But this committee, this subcommittee, has been put in place to be responsive to a lot of this work. And so my recommendation to you is that even though that briefing will happen at the big C4 meeting on March 2, your meeting in March, this group's meeting in March, an hour and a half per your comments earlier, I'm recommending that it be mostly a time to be responsive and comment on how you want C4 to respond to the EA. I noticed in the presentation a minute ago that they'd like to talk a little bit more about monitoring. And if we think that we can do both, I'm happy to try to facilitate that. But actually, my recommendation is that you prepare your comments for the big C4 body. And we can take your conversation in March to the big C4 table on April 6th, which is the day before the comment period is due. That way that the C4 comment period is informed by this group who is focused in the weeds about what's going on. ODOT will be available at this group in March for any questions during your discussion. That's my recommendation for how C4 can proceed. That's where I can be helpful in this process, is helping you get that information in that sort of stair-step system. That's a lot to maybe digest, but if there's a deviation from that or a different plan that you'd like to propose or proceed on, please let me know so I can help you be successful in this way.
Yeah. Thank you, Trent. I don't know if Della or Nicole can respond, but one of your slides, you displayed both volume over capacity and a level of service. But I just want to just verify, is my understanding that the areas where there was a call for some adjustments or changes where there were impacts was based on volume over capacity, correct? And not level of service? Or were they both factors in determining impacts to an intersection or to a roadway or what it may be?
Ella, do you want me to jump in there? So the where we determined impacts was based on the mobility standard for the jurisdiction. And in almost all cases, it was volume to capacity ratio. And so whatever the jurisdiction set as their mobility standard is what we use to determine if there was an impact. So there were a couple instances, I don't recall exactly which ones they were off the top of my head, where level of service was the threshold that was used, but in almost all instances it was volume to capacity.
Right. And these kind of details matter when you look at results and you look at studies. And the other one, you've heard me say this before, but I just want to say it again, is that I think using 2015 as the base year for the comparison was not a fair year to do that, because we are already realizing substantial diversion in 2015 as a result of the bottleneck and ODOT responsibility. Call it a failure of the facility, but it just doesn't seem fair that the impacts from the ODOT facility are going to be realized if you use 2015 as the base year versus 2010, for example. That's just no need to respond to that, but I just think that's where one of the flaws, I think, in the analysis is that should a city suffer the mitigation or not realize a potential adjustment or a mitigation project because it wasn't identified through that analysis, when it is an impact. And that's why I think, frankly, if we built the facility, made the improvements, and then told it a year later, for example, we would have the before and after, but we're doing this simultaneously. So the tolling starting before the project's completed, the construction project and the capacity project. So therefore, all we have to do is to go back and look at some previous studies to do that same analysis. I know that's an exercise. You don't need to measure anything because you already have the data from 2010 and other years. So I'll just stop there. Any other comments, folks? All right. Closing comments from staff. Della? Nothing?
Just want to thank you all for the continued conversation, and we will continue to be here and working through these items. I know it's, there are points of tension through this, and these are challenging conversations that we're having. There's a lot to still be discovered, but we will continue to work and incorporate feedback and look for ways to improve the analysis and the outcomes. And appreciate all of your time and partnership.
All right. Well, thank you so much. See you all